The history of humanity has been intrinsically linked to the exploration of the seas, but few cultures have personified this connection in such a visceral and spiritual way as the Vikings. For centuries, the popular image of these Scandinavian peoples was limited to that of brutal plunderers who appeared from the mist to sow terror on European coasts. However, the most recent archaeological discoveries in Denmark and Norway are causing an absolute paradigm shift. The discovery of what experts have called an underwater Viking ship graveyard, although technically they are underground and not underwater, has revealed a world of sophistication, wealth, and commercial reach that no one could have imagined. What lies within these tombs is not only astonishing for its material splendor, but because it rewrites the identity of an entire people, transforming the barbarians into cosmopolitan merchants and sublime artisans. Leave a like, subscribe, and share. Let's begin. This archaeological phenomenon has had its epicenters in strategic locations such as Lisbjerg in Denmark and Bora National Park in Norway. Unlike conventional shipwrecks found on the seabed, victims of storms or battles, these ships were deliberately placed underground. For the Vikings, the ship was not simply a means of transport or a war machine. It was a sacred object, a spiritual vehicle designed to transport the soul of the deceased across the invisible waters that separate the world of the living from the realm of the dead. Whether it be Valhalla, presided over by Odin, or Folkvanger, the field of the goddess Freya. The magnitude of these findings is such that historians speak of a perfect time capsule. By burying entire ships under earthen mounds, the Vikings inadvertently created anaerobic or protected environments that have preserved artifacts that would normally have disappeared due to erosion or the passage of time. Thanks to the use of cutting-edge technology, specifically ground-penetrating radar, modern archaeologists have been able to see through layers of sediment without the need for destructive excavation. This technology emits electromagnetic pulses that bounce back when they encounter solid structures, allowing the silhouette of buried ships to be mapped with centimeter precision. In Bora, for example, ground-penetrating radar revealed the presence of large ships that had remained hidden in plain sight for more than 1,000 years, right under the feet of visitors to the national park. Without a doubt, one of the discoveries that has most impacted the international scientific community is the discovery of the tomb of a noblewoman in Lisbjerg. In Viking culture, social status was not exclusive to warrior men. Aristocratic women held immense economic and symbolic power, and their funerals reflected this reality. Inside the structure of the buried ship, archaeologists found a ceremonial wooden box that has been described as magnificent. The importance of this object lies in its extreme rarity. In the entire history of Scandinavian archaeology, only 2 similar boxes were known to exist. This third piece, recovered in an amazing state of preservation, contained inside a burial goods collection that defies stereotypes of Viking rudeness. Inside the box, the noblewoman carried with her a pair of iron scissors forged with enviable technical precision and various bronze and silver ornaments. But what is truly astonishing is the presence of gold thread and polychrome glass pearls. These materials were not native to the Nordic regions. Gold thread, for example, was an extreme luxury product that usually came from Byzantine workshops or the Mediterranean. Their presence in a tomb in northern Denmark is irrefutable proof that the Vikings were not only experts in coastal navigation, but were part of a network for the exchange of luxury goods that connected the Scandinavian fjords with the most distant centers of power in the known world. The analysis of these treasures has revealed a truth that changes everything we knew about the medieval economy. The Vikings were the great connectors of their time. Inside the buried ships, alongside the remains of the nobles, Arab coins known as dirhams, minted in the 9th and 10th centuries, have been found. These silver coins are the silent testimony of an epic trade route. The Vikings didn't just look west towards the British Isles. Their gaze was also fixed on the east. They navigated the great river systems of the Volga and Dnieper rivers, crossing the steppes of present-day Russia and Ukraine until they reached the shores of the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea. There, they traded marten furs, Baltic amber, and, sadly, slaves for the pure silver of the Abbasid Caliphate and silks from the Orient. Finding these coins in an underground cemetery off the mainland in Norway demonstrates that a Viking chieftain's wealth depended directly on his ability to participate in this globalized trade. But the wonder doesn't end with metal or glass objects. The funerary rites documented in these ship graveyards reveal a complex and, at times, awe-inspiring worldview. In several of the burial mounds at Bor and Liesbjerg, human remains have been found that show signs of unique rituals. The recovered bones and teeth have been subjected to stable isotope analysis, which has allowed scientists to reconstruct the diet and geographical origin of those buried. It has been confirmed that these elites enjoyed ritual banquets before burial, consuming large quantities of beef and pork. In fact, the skeletons of these animals were also found inside or around the ships, sacrificed so that the deceased would have sustenance on his journey to the afterlife. In some particularly intriguing cases, a central pit has been discovered inside the ship intended for a cremation pyre. This suggests that the burial ritual did not always consist of leaving the body intact, but that sometimes the ship functioned as a monumental pyre. The purifying fire consumed the leader and his most valuable possessions, while the community watched as the smoke rose, supposedly carrying the soul to the divine abodes. However, in cases where there was no cremation, the preservation of details is so high that even fragments of fine textiles worn by the deceased have been recovered, revealing that Viking fashion was colorful and used valuable imported dyes. Leave a like, subscribe, and share. The sophistication of these findings also highlights the advanced engineering knowledge possessed by the Vikings. The boats found in the tombs show construction techniques with clinker, overlapping planks, that gave them unique flexibility and strength, allowing them to navigate both the open sea and shallow rivers. Burying one of these technological gems was a massive economic sacrifice for the community. It was the modern equivalent of burying a tycoon inside a state-of-the-art private jet. This fact underlines that, for the Vikings, religion and social prestige were priorities that outweighed immediate material utility. Detection technology has been a great ally in this discovery. Previously, archaeologists relied on finding visible mounds that had often already been looted in antiquity. Today, ground-penetrating radar makes it possible to identify ship graves that have been leveled by agriculture for centuries and are invisible to the naked eye. This has allowed us to discover that the landscape of Denmark and Norway is literally littered with these ghost ships. Each time ground-penetrating radar traces the unmistakable almond shape of a Viking ship beneath the ground, a new opportunity arises to study a specific moment in history without having previously disturbed it. The exceptional nature of the objects found, such as the aforementioned box of the noblewoman, lies in the fact that they are pieces that do not usually survive the test of time. Wood rots quickly in most soils, but the specific chemical conditions of these cemeteries allowed the box to reach modern archaeologists almost intact. Inside, in addition to the scissors and the gold thread, small amulets were found that link the owner to magic practices or spiritual protection. This adds a layer of depth to our understanding of everyday life. The Vikings were pragmatic and warriors, yes, but they also lived in a world saturated with symbolism and ritualism. Why is this ship graveyard so important now? Firstly, because it breaks the one-dimensional view of the Viking as a plunderer. It presents us with a society with a clear class structure, a deep respect for hierarchy, and a connection with the rest of the world that rivaled that of any other civilization of the time. Secondly, because it demonstrates that Scandinavia was not an isolated periphery, but a central node in a network that linked the Arctic with Baghdad and Constantinople. The objects found in Liesbjerg and Bora are physical evidence of an early globalization driven by nautical expertise and a hunger for adventure. The astonishment generated by these findings also lies in the contrast between what we see and what we expected to see. We were expecting axes and helmets, without horns, of course, and we found Byzantine gold thread, Arab silver coins, and women's treasure boxes that display supreme artistic delicacy. This indicates that Viking culture valued beauty and refinement as much as physical strength. The presence of slaughtered livestock, such as pigs and cows, also tells us of a very successful agricultural and livestock society, capable of producing enough surpluses to afford these monumental burials. As excavations continue and more data obtained by ground-penetrating radar is analyzed, it is very likely that the number of ships detected will continue to increase. We are facing the discovery of a network of cemeteries that functioned as ceremonial centers for confederations of tribes or clans. These places were not just cemeteries. They were monuments to political power. By burying a leader in a ship, the clan asserted its right to the land and its connection to a lineage of navigators and conquerors. The educational impact of these discoveries is incalculable. Future generations of historians and archaeologists now have a much richer corpus of data with which to study the transition from pagan to Christian Scandinavia. Many of these boat burials date from the later stages of paganism, times when funerary rites became even more ostentatious, perhaps as a defensive reaction to the spread of Christianity from the south. The treasures found are, in a way, the last cry of a culture that refused to abandon its traditions and its gods. In conclusion, the underwater Viking ship graveyard, found underground in northern Europe, is one of the most fascinating discoveries of the 21st century. What's inside? The gold, the silver, the foreign coins, and the personal belongings of the nobility is astonishing because it forces us to look the Vikings in the eye and recognize in them a culture of astonishing complexity. They are no longer just the protagonists of horror stories written by English monks. They are the architects of a global commercial network, artisans of unexpected elegance, and believers in an eternal journey that required taking the best of the world with them. Thanks to ground-penetrating radar technology and the patience of archaeologists from Denmark and Norway, these ghost ships have sailed again, not on the sea, but in our imagination, reminding us that the past always has secrets hidden away, waiting for the right moment to emerge and change our history. The legacy of these buried ships will endure long after their physical discovery. Every Arab coin analyzed and every gold thread catalogued is a victory against oblivion. The Vikings, masters of the horizon, finally achieved what they sought with their land ships: immortality. Through these treasures, their world comes back to life, showing us an era where courage was measured in leagues sailed and sophistication was kept in ceremonial wooden boxes, ready for the eternal banquet in the halls of the gods. Archaeology has rescued from silence a civilization that, far from being barbaric, was one of the most dynamic and fascinating pillars of human history. Leave a like, subscribe, and share. See you next time.